in the Bible, wine was associated with the general human life. But when it comes to raising a God-fearing child, when it comes to raising a servant of God, a sensible and responsible person in the society, alcohol in itself is not worthy of praise. That I have done a research.
Okay.
Yes.
I respect that. But let's not forget that Noah was also very close to God. And he got drunk. Let's not forget that.
He was the first wine planter.
And so he had to drink.
Yeah.
I
So-
think
So, and coming to Dr. Villo's previous point, in fact, Timothy even told his deacons to take some wine
Okay. I think
in moderation.
yeah,
I
it's
think
best
it-
not to go into the biblical.
I think
Yeah.
it becomes an endless debate.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that their argument is not based on theology.
You said you want to criticize the government. Now criticize the government.
Okay.
Very good evening to all the ladies and gentlemen, young, old, of different generation I can see here. Welcome to a dialogue on Nagaland Liquor Total Prohibition Act of 1989. And thank you all for registering and paying a nominal fee. I myself have registered to be part of this program, though I was invited to be a moderator for today's event here. The main topic is going to be very interesting, so I'm not going to take much time, but it'll be a failure if I don't give a little context. It will on why we are having this dialogue. It's not a debate as such; it is a dialogue. Basically, we're going to be having a conversation with our remarkable panelists who are, as already shared in the social media platforms, are influential voices of Nagaland. And as we have seen in the social media and different mediums, the press releases, that differing views and opinions, bashing people left and right, bashing institutions left and right. But I think it is time we pause and we reflect, we critically engage in healthy conversations to understand the differing opinions, the conflicting opinions and ideas, and more importantly, to make informed decision about which side we are on, right? Or what should be the way forward. So as I gather from this, as I was preparing for this dialogue here, I was thinking that now I think it's the right time, not just discussing about, what is right and what is wrong and what should be and what shouldn't be, but more importantly, about what road should we take to ensure that we meet the common goal of the differing opinions that we have, and that is for the larger good of our society. Many of us who are present here, especially the young ones, we have not really seen how the situation of Nagaland was in the early 80s and 70s, as they say, about how bad the situation was. But we have all seen the negative impact the alcoholism problem has caused in our society, be it the illegal criminal activities, or be it the health hazard, and social issues like domestic violence. The Chief Minister himself has stated that NLTP Act cannot be called successful, right? So with this, what is the way forward then, right? When we are critically discussing about this, which one is right and which one is wrong, that is something that we need to do. So when the NBCC very interestingly called for a prayer on 25th August, we were there as an audience, church member as well, and the church, the pastor led the prayer. We all said amen and we prayed. But the chairperson, another concerned citizen, wittingly responded that though we have just prayed and said amen to it, if we are to cast our vote, we don't know which side we are on. So even the church is conflicted that way, right? I mean, the church and its members are also confused rather of what is right and what is wrong. So with this perspective that we are facing at this current juncture, I would like to call one by on stage all our remarkable panelists that we have today from different fields. First, I'd like to call our Professor Rosemary Dzuvichu on stage. As you come on stage, I'll introduce that, as you all may be aware, she's a very popular face, a very reputed academician and social activist, and as an advisor to the Naga Mothers Association, she will primarily bring women's perspective into the discourse in line with the position of the Naga Mothers Association. We also have some members from the Naga Mothers Association as well joining the discussion today. The second, we have Dr. Villo Naleo. Please come on stage, sir. He's an academic dean of the Shalom Bible Seminary. He has been spearheading the NBCC's movement for clean election campaign. He will represent the NBCC in the discourse on the NLTP Act 1989. The third panelist we have, Mr. Colo Mero. He's a sports enthusiast, an entrepreneur who is also strongly associated with the church. He will represent the NBCCs in our discourse on NLTP Act as well. The fourth panelist we have Mr. Imlisungkum Jamir. He is a recovering alcoholic since 1995. And when I was just sensitized by him that recovering alcoholic means it's that he's sober, but he's still recovering. So that's a new perspective that we're going to hear from him. And he's been passionately working as a freelance counselor for people struggling with alcoholism for over 30 years. And he will enrich us with a perspective from people struggling with alcoholism. The fifth panelist we have is Mr. Joel Naga. He's a very popular among the young people as well. He's an anti-corruption activist come politician. He has been heading the Raising People's Party of Nagaland, and he will enrich us with social and political perspective on the NLTP Act as well. So we, as you can see, right, this discussion is going to get very interesting. And last but not the least, of course, the main host and the founder and the brain who brought about this idea of bringing different perspective physically and having different ideas, different people coming together and physically dialoguing, having a conversation about this subject, Mr. Ransom Lungleng. Many people don't know him, and then I see many people on social media asking about his background as well. Would you like to know a little bit about him as well? That's what I thought so, and I said I should introduce you and tell the crowd as well. He's a postgraduate from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. He was awarded the Prime Minister's Rural Development Fellowship by the Government of India in 2014, and he was also awarded the German Chancellor's Fellowship by the Federal Government of Germany in 2018. And why is he here in a small place in Nagaland, right? So he has a vision and passion to make dialogue on various social issues, which is part of our social interaction and governance. And he's, as said, the host and founder of the Lungleng show, and currently has, as I checked just 2 minutes back, he has about 86.8K subscribers. I'm one of them. And as I've known him personally for past few years, as during the PMRDF fellow, he's somebody who is so passionate and dedicated to the social issues. And it is because of his will, right, and this dedication that despite very little resources, he could bring up young people together, gathered here to be able to have a conversation on significant topic like this. And similarly, if you go and subscribe to his channel, you will see a range of socio-economic, political issues that he has discussed upon. So with that, Ransom, please come on stage and take over this conversation. All of us are looking forward to it, and then we hope all of you will stay till the end of the program and also give your opinion towards the end.
So everyone, welcome to the show. It's a great time. It's going to be a great time for us because we are seated here physically and able to sense what the person is saying and how the person is moving when he says something, when he speaks something. I think that's the physical connection has more importance than the one that we listen, on video or online. Or so it's going to be a very distinct conversation that we're going to have. And I'm very glad that you all are here for this event. And thank you, Gracie, so much for such a special introduction for all of us. I think, you have introduced far better than who we are, that, now we are kind of intimidated over how we are going to deliver all that, their expectations. The whole objective of this conversation is not to see who is going to go away with a trophy of win as a winner. It's just to lay out how difference of opinions exist on this issue, and how we can understand those differences and see the best for ourselves as well. When we bring together guests like this, we all assume that there is going to be a debate, and we have been bashed, here and there on social media that it's going to be 1 versus 4. Meaning Mr. Joel Naga versus all of them together. It's not going to be like that. I can guarantee that. We'll have a very mature and responsible conversation, but respectfully agreeing and disagreeing with each other. I mean, that's the whole objective of this conversation. And I'm glad you all are here. It means so much and a lot to all of us. And it shows that you care for the state like Nagaland and for the state policy. And this is a much needed conversation. Thank you so much. And to all the panelists, thanks for coming in. And especially, I'm very glad that NBCC agrees to send, our two guest speakers as their representatives. They may not necessarily represent; they're not a spokesperson for NBCC, but they will voice opinion based on what the NBCC has been holding on. Of course, they have the freedom and liberty to defer what the NBCC thinks on this issue. And Gracie has introduced all of us very well. Let me not duplicate those introduction again. So we all know that the issue has been boiling, and this has been on discussion for quite a long time, since 1989. It's been 34 years. So since the time this act was passed in Nagaland Assembly, this act was introduced in Nagaland Assembly. By the time that was introduced, when a child was born, that child has become as old as we all are. And then it's high time for us to look back how successful and how accomplishing this act has been. Whether this act is serving a purpose, whether the logical test of this act still stands, or it's just for the sake of it. So we're going to have that conversation, and I'm very, very excited about this.
We're finally here, Nagaland's first business school. If you are an aspiring entrepreneur or have an existing business and need help to scale your business, be a part of our exclusive business program. Here we work closely with you to design and build your business plan. You get access to markets, you get to network with 20 phenomenal startup founders, and also learn how to raise money for your business. Phenomenal content and mentors. Reach out to us.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Lungleng, for inviting us to your talk show. I truly believe that through this program, through this event, the church, the NBCC, will wake up. Because as far as the issue of prohibition is concerned, I just want to ask the church a very simple question. In the 1980s, when the church leaders and the church as an organization agitated for the imposition of prohibition in the state, did you ask of God? Did you ask from God? Yes, they prayed. The church leaders, they prayed. But did they ask God? This is the first question I want to ask the church, because it's very simple. Before we do anything, before we undertake anything, we have to ask from God whether it's His will or not. See, for me, the issue of prohibition is not about the revenue generation by the government. For me, the discussion, the debate is theological. Whether it has any scriptural basis, whether it's biblical. And I find that the issue of prohibition is not biblical at all. See, the issue of prohibition, if you talk about it, it's a simple declaration to the world that the NBCC has failed in the pulpit. Because they have failed in the pulpit, they are now resorting to, legislations and laws to control the spiritual life of the citizens. Now I find a problem with that, because this is very dangerous. In fact, the church is going against the very purpose of God, which is free will. God has given us free will. That is the explicit purpose of God. And thirdly, as I've stated before, the issue of prohibition is it based on the Bible? Is it biblical? The Bible never condemns a drinker, nor condemns alcohol. Yes, it cautions against drunkenness. But no verse in the Bible says drinking is a sin, alcohol is a sin. So I take issue with the NBCC on these theological grounds. So hopefully we can have a good discussion on that.
Now we can see the smokes coming up, right? Like, so it's going to be very interesting. So, yes, that's the core objective of this. You know, I want different opinions and see like how it works and how it looks. Now, some of our speakers had mentioned that about the theological underlining on NLTP and all this. Now, but I want to know how did it start related to this movement? I mean, as an NMA from NMA, how would you say that? How did the movement start?
I know you're looking at me.
Yeah.
And over the years, there's been a lot of blame put on the Naga Mothers Association and the women. But we have to also understand the scenario. And I'm sure even Joel, at that point of time, would not have been, how old would you be in 1989?
I was in class 9.
Yeah, so, so I think.
But then
no.
I was drinking.
Yeah, I can imagine, yes. But, the fact that we need to remember this was before the ceasefire. We were in the midst of so much of conflicts in our own villages and towns and wherever it is, so much of killings among ourselves. And on top of that, you had our youth who were totally into so much of drinking. And a situation became so serious that there were a series of meetings between the church and the women groups and the mothers. And when we talk of the Naga mothers, then it was all the tribe women's organizations. Every district, every village, every town, everyone felt that parents must do something. And I think it was with that idea that the church also felt that something like this, some pressure, because we are the citizens. If the citizens don't pressurize the government, how do we all cope up with this kind of mechanism and addiction? And I think it was with that I'm the second generation Naga mothers, for your information. So I was not in that circle that began the prohibition, protests and all that. But we have our records, we have our history, and we stand by what had happened. And the position today that on looking back, it is important today. On looking back, because the government actually has had several consultations on the NLTP. Every successive government has had actually. And the unfortunate thing is with every they called it public consultation, but with every consultation, the NBCC would never be there. Okay. And since we, the Naga mothers particularly, and the women everywhere, all the mothers from all the tribes, since it was with the full support of the Naga mothers and the Naga women that the NBCC had gone forward, we had supported the church and its movement, there were repeated questions and repeated requests to the state government to include the NBCC if we are to have any public debate. And I remember representing the Naga mothers in several of these consultations. And in all these consultations, particularly the NMA said, a consultation cannot end like this without the presence of the persons and of the organization that actually initiated this prohibition and imposition of the Prohibition Act.
Mm-hmm. I mean, would there be any response from the NBCC's representatives?
You were also not there, but
I was not there. But I'll speak on behalf of the church history as I have learned from. I think we need to go back to 1872, like when E.W. Clark was here. He was there, and then as the first missionary, he was more on the moderation, the use of moderation, especially with rice beer. But then there were two people, Haggard and Perrin, in 1890s, who replaced him. He was on furlough. He was on vacation, on sabbatical leave. E.W. Clark was. And so when he was replaced, these two, Haggard and Perrin, were also activists from the temperance movement in America, and so they wanted to put a blanket ban on the use of alcohol, especially with the Khriemenuo church the first church in Mokokchung district. And so there was a missionary antagonism. We see that. So the later missionaries who came to Nagaland probably got the idea or the idea of this prohibition from Haggard and Perry. Then, if we have to come back to the political realm, I think there is also a term called political rum, which is alcohol. During the Naga national movement and of this time, people, especially in Tuensang areas, they have seen the Indian armies using Dakota flight to drop down literally bundles and bottles and cartons of rum, as called as political rum, during the election times. And so these were seen as the outside influence that came from within the Indian state. And I think then the churches also have seen this as something which is an outside force. So that also might have contributed to the prohibitory laws. Then the third one is also, as ma'am also have shared about the multiple problems that we have suffered those days. I think I don't need to repeat, but those were some of the issues, some of the things that I remember, and as I have also I can recollect back of the issues.
Okay.
Colo can also, if you want to, please.
Yeah, if you have anything to add.
I personally think that when it was first, initiated, it may be more of social than spiritual or, biblical.
This movement.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know, but that is what I assume. That is what
Okay.
I think. It was like, in my case also, it's very personal when it comes to this act, this evil, social evil. I lost my father. He probably was drinking in the 70s and 80s. He died young at 47. And so prior to his death also already divorced because of drinking. Broken home. We were left with our mother. And then in those days we are talking about premium liquor and then spurious liquor now. Talking about quality. Giving so much importance to that also. I don't know what kind of liquor he drank in 70s and 80s. Maybe premium. He still died. Then it was enacted. This law was passed. The first year I went to college. That was 89. And so I was so excited. Because I don't want people to lose, a parent like I did. And the kind of broken home that I had. So we became very passionate. My family story was just one. Every family story in those days will have similar stories. And years down the line, again I lost my younger brother. He passed away because of drinking at 37. In his case, probably he drank spurious alcohol, I'm not sure, but most probably. And so still died younger, 10 years younger than my father. And so we're talking so much about this quality, the issues based on this, but even if it is social evil, it's destroying lives, it's destroying families, it's destroying our society in every aspect, our career. And so the church, probably in those days, with this kind of, passion and concern and burden and pain, must have come up with the influence of course, those early Christians and all. And
So I'll stop you right there. Yeah. So we'll come back again and again. I want to ask Mr. Sangam Jamir. Now they have shared a little bit experience of how was it like before the act came into being. And you as a person who left or who became sober in 1995, that must be the time period where you started already drinking by the time this act was passed. Or I don't know. How would you like to describe the period of time when before this act came into being?
Thank you. Actually, I started drinking very early, by 78, 79. And then by the time this act was enacted, I was really a hardcore drinker.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to that, I was studying in, just a short story.
Yeah.
I was studying in Shillong. Those are hippie days. And there, in Shillong, actually, I tasted marijuana, had some pills. and all these things. And I would say that I tasted everything excepting broken glass and steel and iron. So after that, see, issue is I just want to come on addiction and the substance also because it is interlinked. So prior to 89, most of us used to drink, and the cost of a bottle of rum was around 46, 47. 90s, 89, 90s, it went up to 120 to 160. And slowly by 92, 93, I could taste the difference of the alcohol. And I would say that by then, maybe I was drinking too much, or maybe it was because of the quality of the liquor, that I was hospitalized, at least 6, 7 times a year because of the drinking. Second thing was this why people are talking that because of prohibition, the substance abuse, drug addiction grew. But there is no proven fact. But the thing is, a piece of heroin was costing 50 rupees, 90s, whereas a bottle of rum was 120 to 160. So 50 rupees was enough to get high. Whereas you had to spend 120 to 160 to get high. So that was how the people shifted to substance abuse. So that was the one point that I think the substance abuse, drug addiction grew in Nagaland. And through this transition to drug use, and it was because that you could not get alcohol easily. First thing. Second thing was to hide the bottle of booze was so difficult.
Yeah.
But substance, you could just hide it anywhere. Plus, there was no regulation, so you could get over-the-counter medicine also.
Thanks.
So I'm not saying that prohibition caused drug addiction, but it was the person, the individual, who is the addict, who was misusing, abusing the substance. And second thing is regarding the Prohibition Act enacted by the churches. I don't blame the church also, because I feel that at that particular juncture in our Naga development, modernization, I think the transition period was so different that the communication, and then the TVs also came, and we were exposed to the outside world.
I think we can get back to that post and the behavioral changes that we witnessed after the act was passed. And now, Mr. Joel Naga, would you also agree that there was a need for this act to be passed at least in 1989? So, do we all think that the act was justified at least in those period of time?
For me, I don't have the answer because the social circumstances in the 1980s, I'm not really sure, but it may have started off as a social issue, but now the church has made it into a prestige issue. Again, that is the problem. Now, some of the pastors and reverends are saying that they will fast unto death. So when they say they will fast unto death, there's no room for discussion. There's no room for debate. It's black and white. Either you listen to us or you don't listen to us. And indirectly, they are saying that we will not allow the government to lift prohibition. Now, I find that very disturbing because I think the church is very much confused. I think here will take some time.
Okay.
Why is the church confused? Because the church is confused between two different things, the right and the wrong, and the good and the bad. So when you talk about killing or rape or stealing, we can clearly demarcate such things as being wrong. And this cuts across cultures, across peoples and across cultures. It's universal that killing is wrong, rape is wrong. And there's also a higher standard. For example, the scripture is the ultimate authority. It's the absolute truth. So we can measure our actions, we can measure words against the word of God and say that, yes, rape, killing is wrong. And that's why we make laws. So that if you violate the laws, you are jailed. But on the issue of bad and good, you cannot demarcate a line. So good and bad is, it differs from culture to culture. See, 30 years back, when we used to go to church, we used to wear jeans. We never wore jeans or t-shirts to the church because it was considered bad. Today is very normal. So it's good. What was bad 30 years back is now good, is normal. For me, pork is good. For a Muslim guy, pork is bad. So should the government bring in legislation or laws to state that pork consumption in the state should be curtailed or banned? No, it will divide society. On the issue of alcohol, it has been established that the Bible does not condemn the drinker nor the drink. But still the church says it is bad, but for me it's good. Alcohol is medicine for me, is a tonic for me. What about the other denominations? The Catholic Church, the Greek Orthodox Church, and other numerous denominations. For them, alcohol is good. They drink. In their Holy Communion, their Holy Communion is fermented wine, alcohol. So who are the NBCC to say that drinking is sin? See, this is so I'm saying that the church is confused between the right and the wrong and the good and the bad.
Okay.
On good and bad, there can be no legislation.
Okay, how would you like to respond to that, NPC? Dr. Villo, or
Okay, since you pointed my name, I would like to also respond to Mr. Joel. When it comes to, I think, the church's concern on drinking, it is not, I think the church is not condemning that drinking is sinful, but then it's the abuse of alcohol. That is wrong. And in that, I think, even from the Jewish culture, even for a Roman Catholic or whatever, I think they condemn that. And the Bible clearly condemns that. And I also want to get back to you regarding the theological issue. When it comes to liquor issue or maybe the use of alcohol in the Bible, it's paradoxical. The Bible says clearly two things. One is drinking. And also, if we talk about drinking, it condemns abusing of alcohol. So, if we look at the passages of the Bible, I think we can do two things. We can either justify our actions, or we can, I think, condemn the use of alcohol. So when it comes to the Jewish culture, there is a clear demarcation. When it comes to the teachings of the law, the Torahs, and then the Jewish priests and all, they also banned this group of people, the law teachers. And so there is no, if we look at the Bible, for example, King Solomon, the one who written Proverbs. In Proverbs 23, you will find that alcohol is bad. You should not even go near. Forget about drinking. When the wine is red, do not go near. But then in passages like Ecclesiastes, you will find King Solomon, the same king, saying that, "Go eat your food with gladness, drink your wine with joyful heart, for it is known that God favors what you do." And so if we look at these two, there are two contradicting things by the same king. But if we have to evaluate his life, we are not in the authoritative position to judge whether he was a good person or a bad person. We do not do that in biblical interpretation. But then when it comes to evaluation of his life, he was regarded as a bad king because of wine, women, and wealth, because he abused those. And then he was just spared because of his father, King David. And towards the end of his life, what he said was in Ecclesiastes 12:13, he said, "Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man." That is what he said. towards the end of his life, because he has written this book towards the end of his life. So when it comes to the use of alcohol in the Bible, I think the Bible also prohibits certain people to restrain. But then we are not in that age right now. So we cannot prescriptively interpret those passages.
Okay.
Yeah, but then there are also passages like Paul also agrees to let Timothy use wine. But then we are not Timothy. Because, I mean, like literally it is only, Paul is only asking Timothy to drink, not us. So we can twist the Bible verses for our own use and then against people also.
I think it will be counterproductive now to, dwell deep into the biblical understanding of this. Now, the question is to all of you who wants to respond to this, can biblical morality be used as a ground for legislation of laws in a state? That's something open to all of you.
Yeah, I think I must intervene.
Yeah, your mic,
I
madam.
still want to go
Mic,
back to
microphone.
I still want to go back to what Joel was talking about. For many of us who actually don't come under the NBCC, I'm a Catholic.
Yes.
Okay.
So the NBCC actually has nothing much to do with me. So whatever statements the NBCC is making, they have every right to do, because they are an organization of the church. They are there to guard the morals of the citizens, and so they have every freedom to do that. For the rest of us, it is up to us whether we want to follow, respect, accept, or whatever. But I feel we are actually evading the subject, because this is what I'm going to talk about. And for Joel, who actually belongs to a political party, it is so very important to remember that when we first started this Prohibition Act, it was with the best of intentions. Best of intentions, banning production, sale, consumption. Consumption, yes, there always is a question mark on, the freedom of food, maybe, because culturally too, we come from a drinking culture, okay, from our traditional drinks. And so I think this has been the biggest problem of Nagas, this addiction to drinking is really nothing surprising, because we come from such a background. But what I'm going to point at is when the act was imposed, there were a lot of clauses actually. If we look at the act, there were a lot of clauses that the government was actually supposed to do, and they did not do it. Last night actually, because I was going to be on such a debate, I had a late night call from some total stranger who WhatsApped me a document, and I found the document so important, because in 1990, 1 year after the act was done, the government actually set up a council which was actually called the State Prohibition Council. I've never heard of it. The Naga mothers, we don't have it on our record. And interestingly, this is passed on the 11th December 1990. And interestingly, in this council, State Prohibition Council, there is also a director of prohibition. I never heard of it. We don't have on our records. And I'm mentioning about our records because number 7 says one representative from Naga Mothers Association will be a member of the State Prohibition Council. So imagine from 1990 till date, we have never been called, and I think it still exists because I don't see an amendment to this. And in the district level too, they are actually supposed to be district committee that should be actually looking at this prohibition. And the job of these councils was actually to advise the government on this act. And I think it would have been very helpful if both the NBCC and the NMA at that point of time were taken into confidence for such kind of council, because by then such kind of discussions would have happened. But for the very fact that all these years, 1990 till 2023, we are in the dark, and no wonder every time even the Naga mother's name is dragged into the kind of debate. So the question is, I think the government has failed. The government has failed us, and we are here today looking at the after effect of the act, how it hasn't been implemented, enforced properly, how there's so much of corruption and bribery, how enforcement is actually done on small gumti shops all along the highway, and how enforcement agencies do not go into high-end hotels and restaurants that are owned by politicians who actually are violating the very act that we are talking about. Very, very serious issues of where we are And who do we want to question? Do we want to question the church that has every right to talk about the Bible, and whether we listen to the church or not, and whether we want to accept what the church is saying? They have every moral authority to talk about it. But then how many of us really question a government that is there? One. Secondly, I think the government has every right, the enemy has taken a position even earlier, that a government has every right to review a law that hasn't worked, or if they want to amend, if they want to enforce even stricter laws. I think we were very clear, especially on the prohibition, because we were actually one of the first non-governmental organizations that started a de-addiction center in collaboration with the Kripa. So we are well aware of the kind of sufferings families have had, of the kind of problems our children have had. So there was a very, very strong opinion that when the government called for any kind of consultation, NBCC must be there. And secondly, it is the prerogative of a government to review. And therefore, today, when there's such a loud public debate, headlines, social media, everyone, and we, 5 of us are here trying to talk about something, wondering who's listening to us actually. I think the real culprit is actually the state government. What has the state government been doing all this time? I wish they had the good sense to bring all stakeholders together, have these kind of open debates and open discussions, and take advice, because for the very fact that they had a state council and never implemented it, never set it up also, I think this is the first step of the kind of failure that we have seen.
So thanks for sharing that insight. Okay, I think you can supplement, but I will add one point to her, and then you can take forward. But there is our narrative is now that NPCC as an organization, as an interest group, has every right to assert what they believe, and living in a democratic society, which is fine. And also, it's a state government's responsibility for this unsuccessful implementation of the act. Now, when we look around the world, we have seen in the United States, Canada, Iceland, Russia, Finland, they all have tried prohibition of liquor, but they all felt that it did not work. And 3 major issues in total liquor prohibition throughout history and across the countries, 3 major issues: bootlegging and black market, health impact, plus loss of revenue. And they all believe that this cannot be prohibited in any sense. The government cannot do anything about this, regardless of how refined the law may be. That's their experiences. And now, how would some of you, would like to respond to that?
Not directly to as a response to what you have just stated. I'd like to take all of us to who actually is the owner of this act. See, we are debating, we are condemning this, that, thinking the church is in total control of the act. It is not. The church was just a pressure group. At that point of time in the 80s, the church rose up to the occasion to deal with this social evil, pressured the government, and the government perhaps felt that it is a necessity, or maybe forced, we don't actually know, made this a law. It is a government law, it is not a church law. There is not a single word about the church or a signature in the act. 22 pages, 85 sections, I think. It's all about the government. And so the government, it's totally in the hands of the government. At most, the church can indirectly influence and control. That's all, even now. The government should be in total control of it. And yet, the government itself and the public in general also, I think, mostly blaming the church. The church cannot go and run these gates in the borders, in our towns, go house to house, boost joints. As far as I remember, I know, a little that I know, I think we have not really seen the sincerity or the seriousness of the government to implement this law. If there was any genuine effort, it was the NGOs like the NMA and the youth associations. But they are not paid for this job. Once in a while, once in a month, A few times in a year, they can only go for checking and, take some actions. But as far as the government agencies are concerned, they are paid to do their job. They are paid, they are getting salary to do that job. And it should be solely their responsibility. Success also will credit to them. Failure also they should admit. And this is why I think the church and both the government should come and own responsibility. And the church also should not be too firm on this, that it should stay in toto, if it's going to be like that, it's not going to work out. I've come to understand that there are legal issues why the court cannot take any action on the basis of this act. Some amendments have to be done. Otherwise, legally, action cannot be taken. Those issues are there. And if the church says, no, it should not be amended, then it's not going to happen. And so when the government is inviting for a review, a revisit, the church also should not take it as a call to lift the ban. Mm-hmm. But take that opportunity and come for a discussion. And then come out, involve all stakeholders. We are representing a few groups here, but there are more stakeholders. Yep. People from law background, people from medical background, police, administration, everyone. Now, police is doing much of the job. According to the act, they are not legally empowered. Even the police. Okay. And NMA or youth forces, if they do take action, they are taking law into their own hands. Ulta, they can be jailed. They can be penalized for trying to implement this act. And so we, the public and the government also should realize it is the sole responsibility of, the government. If we want to challenge I'm sorry I'm taking much time, but if we want to challenge the church in the light of this social evil, let us challenge the church for failing in its ministry. Failing in the pulpit, Mr. Joel has mentioned. Failing to reach out to families, individuals who are, recovering. Mr. Jamir here is doing a wonderful ministry and getting into various churches now and councils. The church should take this advantage and, use people like them. Yeah. And start such kind of ministries. I think we can challenge the church in those areas.
Yes, I think that point is well taken. Since
I would like to supplement that.
Yes, please respond to what they shared.
I think this is probably the first time I'm going to support the government.
Okay.
And I'm laughing inside.
Okay. You don't believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, on the issue of prohibition, it's simply not implementable. Definitely not. If the angels come down and become excise officials and policemen, yes, definitely. It's not implementable. See, our excise officials, our policemen, they're also human. They're only human. They have the strengths and weaknesses. And mind you, every man has a price. So even if the reverends and the pastors, they take the role of the excise officials and policemen, it's not possible. Because the lure of money will be their downfall. When we talk about prohibition, we are talking about amounts in thousands of crores. Every day in Dimapur, these kamdiwalas and these big hotels, whatever, they're giving to the tune of 50 lakhs to the police officials, to the excise officials, to the undergrounds. 50 lakhs per day. The money is huge. And what is the greatest temptation of the servants of God? Money and women. In fact, it's more for them. So I keep saying, the issue of prohibition has corrupted whole societies. See, this is something which we don't talk about. Corruption, the byproduct of prohibition. The excise officials, the policemen, they have been corrupted. Our legislators, our departmental officials, they have been corrupted. Whole society has been corrupted. So this is something this is the reality for all of us. And I strongly believe that the prohibition cannot be implemented in the state. Not at all.
I mean, there is a, like I mentioned, around the world, a lot of countries have experienced that prohibition law had failed them all. So they ended up lifting it. I mean, that's something for a NBCC and church to think about. But before we jump into that, Mr. Sangam, do you have any response to that?
Hello.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not in favor of against the government or the churches.
You can speak close to the mic, yeah, please.
The thing is, which I have observed, that the government also failed very miserably. Because, see, if you just question a government official, I think he will not know about the actual act. NLTP Act, no government servant knows. And even in the ATI, that is Administrative Training Institute, you just go and find out what has been taught. Nothing on NLTP Act. So how can the government servant know about the act and impose the prohibition law without knowing the actual act? That's one of the mistakes, the weaknesses of the government. Second thing is, many people are finding fault with the church regarding the Prohibition Act, but we have to remember that at that juncture, the abuse and the misuse of alcohol, it was something new to the society. And I feel that the church leaders, our parents, our fathers, they thought that the Naga society was lost. There was no way out they thought that there was no way out for the Nagas to go forward. So because of that, I think that the church also used some force to impose this act on the government.
Okay.
I feel that, that is my opinion. I don't know whether, what my friends will say, but I think that we have to study this act at that juncture.
Yeah.
But the second thing is now, after 30 years, those church leaders or legislators are no more with us.
That's true.
Now, the church leaders or legislators, I think even, I believe, our honorable minister, chief minister, he was not in the seat.
Yeah.
89.
89.
Yeah. So, I think with the fresh blood, fresh outlook, views, the government and the church should sit together and work out some concrete program, whether to lift or not. Second thing is, when we just focus more on prohibition, we are blinded on the bigger issue of addiction.
The substance abuse.
The substance abuse. Substances, even alcohol, drugs, and all those things. And because of this, the secondary, so many addictions are coming up. Diseases are, even though we have a very high rate of HIV. This was because of the product of little using from this drug addiction. So I think that the high time the government and the church sit together and work out a concrete plan.
I think, that's a great insight. I would like to bring out the NBCC statement that they made last time. You say that pragmatism is another sort of relativism. The primary is not about the well-being of the ordinary people. It's about how the wealthy may profit from it, which is bad. That's what you said. And the question is not what is the correct thing to do. Rather, it is how much I will gain. And this occurs when we stop thinking about God and start doing things our own way. So this is, you're bringing the spiritual aspect and your relationship with God into, the idea of alcohol or liquor prohibition. And also NPCC also mentioned somewhere in that same letter that, I will read out, okay? The thing that has killed us and keeps killing our people is always considered the biggest fat cow, which means the government considers alcohol, liquor as something the best cow to give us revenue. NBCC questioned, why can't government think of any other things as a source for revenue generation? So, revenue generation is there when there is no prohibition for alcohol. I want to give you an example from Mizoram experience. Mizoram imposed total liquor ban in 1997, and then they lifted partially, but alcohol started available, at wine shops. Now, after that, their revenue generation increased from 34 lakhs a year to 65 crores per year. So there's that's a huge jump for 99.5% of revenue. And I think NBCC also agreed that there is a need for revenue generation, and alcohol will generate is going to generate revenue for the state. I think even NBCC agrees to that when it comes to revenue generation, right? So now, from that point of view, how would you like to defer, and how would you like to defend the prohibition?
Oh, okay. Let me speak on behalf of NBCC now. I think when it comes to the legislation of morality, it is a philosophical question. And so there is a debate still going on, faith and reason and all. But then I think morality is like love, kindness, justice, harmony. All this can be legislated in a sense like in a form of education. We have all learned what is kindness, what is goodness, what is justice from our education system. And so to debate on the legislation of morality, I think there is no conclusive statement on that. We can keep on debating and keep on going on doing that. But when it comes to the revenue, I know, as of my knowledge, there is no GST in alcohol. And so there is the direct profit for the state government. That is one thing. The other thing is there are many avenues for the church, not for the church, for the government to generate the revenue. Forget about, like the past factories which have failed. We talk about Chuli Pepper Mill. We'll talk about Wazeho Cement Factory. We also talk about Nagaland Sugar Mill in Dimapur. The government, I think, should think of reviving these factories which were actually generating the state revenue in those days, in the 90s even. And I think the GDP then is very different from what the GDP is now. And so I think there are many ways, even ecotourism. And we talk about tourism, and then the Hornbill Festival, just a showcase for 10 days. And then they stop talking about that, about tourism. And I think the government should explore other avenues. And not only think about the prohibitory rule, law, which is hampering maybe, I don't know how much % of the state budget. But then they should think out of the box. And when it comes to the government, I think in implementing, they have not even give their full heart, half heart, not even the 10%, I think. If we have to look at the workforce of the excise department. The excise department in Nagaland has a very meager workforce. It has got only 336 field personnel and officers, according to with a measure of like 22.3 lakhs of population. That's the 2011 ratio. But whereas if we talk about Mizoram, it has the workforce of 559. And they have the half of the population of Nagaland. And so I think we need to increase the workforce. We need to implement the prohibitory law with more force. And I think if the government is not giving the will to let the church say, to lift, I think it's a little farce. Since the church, with good intention, try to put the spoke in the wheel.
Okay. Now, just want to redirect one question to Joel. See, NBCC is criticized left and right for this issue. And you have also expressed your displeasure in how the church is playing a role for liquor prohibition, which has caused many problems. I would see to that they are, let's consider them as just one of the pressure groups. And they have I believe in a democracy, they have every right to do that. But the problem seems to be government happened to listen to them. Now, there is a problem for us in understanding now whose fault it is and whom do we blame that. The church is playing its part. Now, the government ended up listening to them. But as a government, if it uses its senses, then if it is not reasonable, they should not have listened to the church. How would you like to?
Now I'll criticize the government. Yes, absolutely. The church should be looked at as a pressure group.
Yes.
But I really don't know what happened in the 1980s. The government of the day, caved into the pressure. But deep down inside, I suspect that the government was afraid. Those days, the government was afraid. Because if the government hadn't listened to the church, probably the leaders were afraid that these church leaders would go to their respective places during the election and influence the voters to vote out the government.
And the Christian government.
Yeah, as anti-Christians. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I think, I strongly suspect that. See, one thing which you should know is, my pastor always says this. We Naga people, we have a very strong controlling spirit. See, during elections, the village councils, they decide to vote in favor of a particular candidate. And they direct the voters to vote for those candidates. Controlling spirit. And I find it very interesting that even the church has this controlling spirit. In spite of all the sane voices, the rational voices, they still stick to the gun. Despite the fact that their argument is not based on theology.
You said you want to criticize the government. Now criticize the government.
Okay. Yeah.
So, even during this time, the government the cabinet took a decision to have this partial lifting.
Partial lifting, yeah.
See, I don't think the government is sincere on this. I know the government is not sincere. 80 to 90% of the state's population is for a lifting of prohibition. But still, the government is not taking a decision. Why? I'll tell you. We have bonded warehouses in the state. And these bonded warehouses, they supply these alcohol to the military and paramilitary. Say, if the requirement of the paramilitary and military is around, say, 10 truck lots of alcohol in a month, these bonded warehouses, they will bring 100 truckloads. So who is benefiting? See, that is the number one question. So I don't think the government is sincere on this. So once again, we have been fooled by the government.
Okay, Mr. Sangam, do you, yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, it works.
Regarding the revenue, actually, we should not concentrate on the revenue. We should look at the economic of the Nagaland. Because see, regarding prohibition or not prohibition, we find that the money is flowing outside of Nagaland. So much money is going to Assam. Recently, because this it has become a hot topic, maybe that is why Assam has now cut down on alcohol price since 1st September.
I see.
They have cut down by 40 rupees per bottle. Another thing is that we
I wasn't
Nagas-
aware.
No, it is that.
I am aware.
I always try to get the knowledge. Second thing is, see, we Nagas are controlling the price in Assam. We Nagas love so much to drink that a person, Naga, will drink 4 or 5 bottles of beer. That is the problem with us Naga. So we are controlling the price system in Assam. And because of this topic coming on lifting of prohibition, they are cutting down on price.
Okay, so before we jump into the next point of discussion, we would like to screen a short advertisement. So if let's take a look. It's just for a few like some 30-40 seconds, and they are Educentre Business Incubation Center, and they are part of our sponsors for this event.
We're finally here, Nagaland's first business school. If you are an aspiring entrepreneur or have an existing business and need help to scale your business, be a part of our exclusive business program. Here we work closely with you to design and build your business plan. You get access to markets, you get to network with 20 phenomenal startup founders, and also learn how to raise money for your business. Phenomenal content and mentors. Reach out to us.
Thank you. I know there are many things and many areas of your interest that you would like to share, many thoughts you would like to share today, but we cannot accommodate everything that's going through in our mind as well. But let's try to understand together and resolve some of the differences and see how we can take this forward as a group in this discussion. Now, when it comes to this, I have heard routinely about people blaming that NBCC should not interfere in what the government is doing. But we had made it clear that NBCC should be considered more like an interest group that has every right to assert its interest against the government. Because we have seen in the 1960s how the churches in US, stood up and fought against the government to implement Civil Rights Act. And churches played a very, very important role. And that's on the line from the standpoint of ethics and moral standpoint of view. So I think NBCC is also doing the same when it comes to the prohibition of liquor. So that, I think, up to that, we are very, very clear. So now, looking at the separation of the church and state, how would you like to say, this is up to this much, the church should not come forward, and up to this much, the government should not go to the church? I mean, the government has no role and no business in the administrative process of the church, but the church has a role towards the government. How do we understand this together? I mean, once we understand this, then there will be less misconception of what the NBCC is also doing and how the government can also play its own role as a government, not listening or not listening to the interest group. So a quick thought you can share, and we will jump to next topic of discussion.
Can I share then?
Yeah, please.
Okay. When it comes to the relationship between the church and the state, I think, as far as I know, for the Baptists, we have the separation of the church and the state very clearly. But I would say that it is not implemented in letter and in spirit. And in a context like Nagaland, where we are more than 90% Christians, I think if Christians disengage ourselves from active politics, can we expect good governance from the 10%? Should the 10% contribute? So I think when it comes to the relationship between the church and the state, I think it should go side by side, not hand in gloves, so that the church will not land into problems. But I think as a pressuring group, I think that should be there. As a moral conscience keeper of the society, the church should be there. The church should not lose her prophetic voice. And if we disengage ourselves, the church disengage ourselves from social responsibility, I think we will die of self-decay. That's my point. And I think the church must engage more in social action.
So by that same logic, are we also believing that when the RSS group give a pressure on Modi government, for example, to ban beef all over the country on moral ground, which they believe beef is immoral as a Hindu, do we also buy the same thing?
No, I don't think RSS is a very different entity, because if you look at the origin of RSS, it started from the Arya Samaj back to the Vedas.
Okay.
And so I think it's not the whole of Hinduism that is backing the RSS. If we study Hinduism, it's very different from what it is.
Yeah.
And I think the RSS is a political, it's not a political wing. The BJP is the political wing, but then the RSS is the cultural wing. And so I think it's a different entity when it comes to the church and then the RSS. They have different roles to play.
Okay. So, you have anything to share?
My point is, where does it all end? The church is saying that alcohol is bad, but we are saying it's good. So the church's stand is not justified, because what is good, what is bad for them is good for us. So where does it end? Tomorrow, if the church says Naga Christians should not eat samosa, for instance, because samosas are mostly made by Hindus and Muslims, can we accept that? Because eating samosa is a choice for us. There's nothing wrong eating samosa. So where does it all end? See, that is a question which I would like to pose to the church.
Okay.
On good and bad, they cannot make a firm stand, because my food may be poison for you. So they cannot make a theological stand on this, on the issue of prohibition, on the issue of samosa. They cannot make a theological stand. Now, as far as the separation of the church and the state is concerned, I believe we have a state chaplain as well. And rightly so. Yes, we have the police churches, the police pastors, rightly so, because we are a Christian majority state. And to a certain extent, we should assert ourselves. But on the issue of legislations and laws, I think the church needs to be very wise and exercise its wisdom.
Yeah, that I agree. I also have my own maybe a personal reservation or maybe apprehension of the church going to the extent of fasting unto death. As an ethicist, I would disagree on that.
Yes.
But we all have a context. You know that slavery has a context. First World War II, Second World War, they have their own context. And I think we also need to see the change of times. And I think we all are on that line now, for now. But then when it comes to the biblical, let me say, not even from the Baptist point of view, but the biblical point of view, it appears that in the Bible, wine was associated with the general human life. But when it comes to raising a God-fearing child, when it comes to raising a servant of God, a sensible and responsible person in the society, alcohol in itself is not worthy of praise. That I have done a research.
Okay.
Yes.
I respect that. But let's not forget that Noah was also very close to God. And he got drunk. Let's not forget that.
He was the first wine planter.
And so he had to drink.
I
So-
think
So, and coming to Dr. Villo's previous point, in fact, Timothy even told his deacons to take some wine
I think
in moderation.
I
it's
think
best
it-
not to go into the biblical.
I think it becomes an endless debate.
Yeah.
But listening to Joel, I think one of the main problems that, one of the a section of the Nagas who are really suffering because of the diktat maybe of the NBCC are the Baptists, like Joel. And this is something we must understand, that Nagaland, actually, we have so many denominations who do not fall under the NBCC. This is something, so I really feel that the NBCC has the moral right to say what is good for the Christians. And why I'm saying it is, for the Catholics, I think the Catholic Association of Nagaland made it very clear that I think we need to look at preventive
harm reduction,
measures, harm reduction. I think those are important aspects that we really need to be debating about, because drinking is a personal choice,
Yes.
And just because you drink, it doesn't mean you're a sinner. No, not at all.
Not at all.
In fact, some of the biggest drunkards are the best people. And some of those guys who don't even drink a drop are the worst.
Like Hitler.
Yes, if you really think about it, actually you cannot put them into compartmental identification, and all those who drink are drunkards, and therefore you cannot enter the gates of heaven. I think these are really ridiculous interpretations of the Bible today. And I know Villo, being a theological teacher, will surely be analyzing on these kind of issues, because I think we must remember, especially we Nagas, we must remember, because I teach American literature and American history, I've always told my students that the problem with us Naga Christians is because we have so much of the effect of American Puritanism. We began with that. We listened to that kind of teaching. And therefore, our whole interpretation of the Bible and of Christianity, even till today, is based on Puritanism in America. And in America, it got lost, It went with the pilgrim, it came with the pilgrim fathers, and then, with that, it got dissociated. But for us Nagas, we're still sticking on to it, clinging on to it. And we also, that's why I think it's very important for young people also to read church history. To read church history. And I think because that is not a part of our syllabus, only then I think will we understand each other much better.
I mean, one way of looking at it, like we are sometimes represented by the Baptist believers rather than, people, for example, like you, who belongs to minority
Really,
denominations.
We all come from families that are a combination of, all kinds of denominations.
Yeah. But Nagaland is
We're happy.
a society that is, unfairly most of the time represented in the society.
It also depends on the way you're brought up.
Yeah.
I come from a strictly Catholic background. My father was a church leader he spent 60 years of his life as a catechist in the Catholic Church. Okay. But he gave us the freedom to choose. So some of them became Baptists, some of them, some of them drank, some of them didn't drink. And, so there's actually so much to do with the way you're brought up and your perception of, what really the church is for you. Is the church a place where you go to seek refuge and to have conversations, or is the church standing there condemning you all the time? Okay. I think we need to know that.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a point here. I think if we look at the church and the state as institutions, it is not difficult to separate. But the church is both institution and it is also called the body of Christ, meaning the body of believers. All of us believers of the Lord Jesus, and we together, we are called the church. And so from that point of view, it is so difficult to separate. Because in Joel, it's not just the political part of Joel. He has a spiritual part of him, social, mental. All these are there in all of us, the total person. Other institutions, other agencies, we have education department, agriculture, social, police, administration. All of these departments, they do their own job. They don't poke into the business of others. Now many are telling the NBCC not to poke its nose in the government or in personal lives and all this. But the church, the mission of the church is the total person. And drinking happens to be one of the social evils which is destroying lives and families and the society. And therefore the church is getting into this, trying to deal with it, do what it can. Maybe it has gone overboard in some ways. Let us discuss so that we can come up with better ways of dealing it. We cannot deny. We cannot just, rule out the government and the church. Both are required. It should never be government versus the church. It should be the government and the church coming together and deal with this. Let the government do its legislative or law and order things in dealing with the social evils, starting with alcoholism, drug addiction and whatever, corruption and all other evils in the society. The church, on the other hand, deal with the other issues. Teach individuals, not just in the pulpit, but right from families. And so dealing with social, moral, and all these issues, I think it is the responsibility of the church. And therefore it has a wide role. We cannot completely rule out. The church has to somehow interfere in my life. I may be doing well in business, but I may be failing miserably somewhere. The church should be concerned for me and help me in that area. And so in one way or the other, the church is going to interfere in my life, in the society that we live in. And whether we like it or not, we are a Christian, based society. And therefore, we cannot avoid church interfering in our, day-to-day activities, including the government. The only way is we come together on the same table and discuss and come up with the best possible solution and not go against one another, condemn one another, which we are doing right now. So both parties, all stakeholders should open up and, come and reason, listen to each other, not condemning each other, but listen to each other, reason, and then come up with the best possible solution. I wish this law was not, there. Then it's so easy to decide for the government also. But it is already there, so why not we all come together and give our best, at least for once, and see if it can happen. And think again, after a few years, maybe if it doesn't work, after giving our best also. I don't believe that the government representatives also from their side here and there, they have stated that the government has given its best, but it has miserably failed. Okay, miserably failed. Totally failed. That part we can agree to some extent. But that they have given their best to implement this, that who will believe? I want to encourage all of us to read the act. It will be made available. Probably if you have not seen, you can reach out to us or you can check out on our social media accounts, which we will share later. And please read this act.
Yeah.
This will answer many of your questions,
Yeah.
and we will know where the ball is.
Yeah, thank you.
Who scored the ball?
Yes, I think the separation of church and state is somehow more or less clear to us, like where the church deal which part the church should interfere and deal which part the government should listen to the church as well. But a still question to you, Mr. Joel. Hypothetically, if prohibition were to be lifted completely or partially tomorrow, here is a thought that came to my mind. How would you feel as a parent of, let's say, you have a teenage boys and girls? As a parent, how would you feel a liquor shop open just next to your building? A vulnerable teenage boys and girls.
See, my children are grown up and they don't drink.
Yeah, hypothetically.
So a wine store next to my house.
Yeah.
I think I live in a residential area. Okay. So does that count?
No, hypothetically.
Okay.
Imagine that there is a liquor shop.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
Drinking and alcohol is considered now a social evil from the
I'm okay
church
with
side.
that. I'm okay with that.
How do we deal with that?
I'm saying I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Personally speaking.
Yeah.
Because I cannot have two standards, one for myself and one for the society. If they want to lift prohibition, I'm all for it. And to your question, if the wine house is near my house, so be it. I'm okay with that.
I mean, that's something that I would really like to hear also, as in how concerned are we as a parents, because we have seen liquor as a social evil. I mean, like in a narrative. So that's something very important to hear, to get it from you. And Mr. Sungkum, having said that by Joel, in the sense that when you have like liquor shop or wine shop open close to your house, and you have a teenagers or you have children who are very vulnerable, who cannot make decisions and who can be lured anytime. Do you think that is a problem as someone who has struggled with it?
It will be a problem. But the issue is if the government lifts the prohibition, it should be done through, some strict regulations has to be implemented.
Okay.
Second thing is the age bar also should be there. Now, I'm very sorry to say, but every pawn shop is selling liquor. Everyone is aware of that. And even teenagers, 12, 13, 14-year children are buying liquor left and right. So I think the church and the state government has to sit down and talk this through and discuss and bring some issues out and make some concrete program for preventive and awareness and sensitization. Not only the government servants, but the church also has to look at these aspects of the disease. Not just the substance, but the disease of our human nature.
Okay.
Those pawn shops were selling only mineral water
and chips. Yeah, I think now that's very interesting. Now I would like to ask the church as well. As in, you have pointed out liquor as you have blamed the government as very interested in lifting liquor. Liquor prohibition, and as a source, because the state sees it as a source of revenue generation, sees it as the big fat cow. And also, why is the NBCC also failing to see other social evils other than liquor? I'm using your own argument against you.
reasons like better quality alcohol or cheaper alcohol, or like then the government will gain hundreds of crores a year if it is lifted. I think this cannot be compared to priceless values and benefits like saving lives, saving homes, saving marriages, saving relationships. These are priceless. Cannot be bought in terms of lakhs and crores also. And it's, like the government will be benefiting a few hundred crores, but hundreds and thousands and lakhs of people will be losing, the same kind of revenue individually and as families. And the families that will lose revenue, income to alcohol, if we have to compare to what the government is going to gain, I don't know. What difference will arise?
I would like to follow up with that thing. When we look at how people die, I mean, tobacco itself is responsible for 7 million deaths a year, for example. And HIV/AIDS is responsible for millions of people dying. And as a church, does it have a responsibility to be standing as firm as it is standing against liquor prohibition? I mean, liquor lifting.
The church should be equally
Mike, please. Yeah.
concerned.
Yeah.
May not come up with another act, but I think we should be equally concerned about all social evils.
But the question is also, are they, in a context of Nagaland? I mean, not personally you, but are our churches concerned as equally as alcohol
Okay.
as
can I
any
answer
other
that?
issue? Yeah. I mean, anyone.
Yeah, I think clean election is one.
Clean election. Yeah, that's
and
good.
I think we are addressing some issues with what our society is facing. And I think many people think that NBCC is overrepresented, as you also have mentioned. But then when there is fire, there is smoke. And I think people get that kind of attention when we consider that as part of our social responsibility. So I think, as I told you earlier, if the church does not do social action, I think the church itself will die of self-decay. And so I think Jesus did not send the disciples to the Roman Catholics, to the Baptists, to the Pentecostals. He sent the disciples to the world and to be an influence, to influence the world. And so the field is the world for the church. I think that is wide enough. On the other hand, I also would like to say that when I get the time, I also have apprehension about regulation. Are we into that now?
Regulation of?
Once the ban
partial
is
lifting
lifted,
and regulation.
once the ban is lifted, I'm very apprehensive about regulation because I have certain reasons.
Okay.
Can I share on that?
You can briefly introduce
Yes,
that.
because when we talk about electricity regularization or maybe communitization, 2003 the government implemented communitization of electricity, and this year in the annual assembly, the CM said that the power department has lost 300 crores. 300 crores from the electricity department. So electricity is a basic necessity for every one of us. And the Nagaland University also have brought out a database research saying that the revenue collection has been much easier since the implementation. But then the power supply, the stability of power has never been improved.
After communitization.
Yeah,
Okay.
even after the communitization. And so there is a very serious problem there. And then if we talk about the Doyang hydro project, where it generates around 79 megawatts.
Yeah.
And then the state is using only 9 to 13%. The department is still in debt, and that is why they are selling the power outside. It's not even given to us, to the consumers. And so I think regulation or communitization of necessity, that is still under running a laws in a department to talk about regulation of alcohol. It can be a very different story. So that's my take.
Maybe in prospect we can,
Okay, coming back to your question.
About NBCC.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Actually, I want to pose this question to my friends here, Colo, Mero, and Dr. Villo. And by the way, guys, we are really friends, okay? We have known each other for so long. So it's not that, we are meeting for the first time and bashing each other. So it's, because of the spurious nature of the alcohol, we can say that tens of thousands of Nagas have died, have become victims. And if I want to put this spiritually, I would say this is a curse upon the Nagas. Now, my question is, can the NBCC take back this curse? Why I'm saying this? Because, as per my understanding, the Nagaland, the NLTP Act, is an extension of the Mosaic laws, the law of Moses. So the adulteress, when she was about to be stoned, to cut a long story short, Jesus came, she lived, and Jesus did not condemn her. He said, go and sin no more. But the NLTP Act condemns both the drinker and the drink. So I believe a curse is upon us. It can be in whatever ways. So I truly believe there's a curse upon us. So can the NBCC take back this curse?
I mean, that's a very difficult question. No one can take curse back for sure. I think I'm pretty sure about it. Now, when it comes to, I want to jump into, this topic will be endless, but, domestic violence. Now, that's the biggest fear that most of us have. Once it is lifted, there's possibility that domestic violence can increase. We don't know how far this is true, but I would like to hear Professor Rosemary's opinion also that, when it comes to drinking, women bear the most brunt of drinking. That's a factually and generally accepted fact that women go through the most, whether they drink or they don't, emotionally, mentally.
That's a part of Naga culture. Patriarchy is such, whether you drink or not, women become the brunt of any kind of violence. But I think there's a misconception with us, and especially with young people on social media particularly, I'm thinking about them, the idea that it's going to be heaven, peace, everything is going to be honky-dory the minute this NLTP Act is lifted. But when you look at states that have implemented, lifted, and imposed again, like our neighbor Assam, for example, it's already again imposed. Yeah. Mizoram's lifting at that point of time had seen the highest of alcoholics as well as other addictions. Assam, at that point of time, when they lifted it for a period, had the highest number of women alcoholics. And so I'm coming back to Nagaland, because when we talk of domestic violence and whatever, I've just mentioned it, but it's important to look at the data that we have. One, the government has not done any serious study on this act. No expert committee has been set up. We are devoid of research findings as to how this has been implemented and what kind of findings do we have? We really don't have. But I saw 2 studies. It's quite interesting. And these studies were done in 2019 and 2019. Yeah. In 2019, on a study in Nagaland, it shows that women-related alcoholism rose to 24.1% under prohibition. And women, heavy drinking. So I'm not talking about the men here, I'm talking about the women. 12.1% heavy drinkers, women alone. And interestingly, in 2019, it went up to 45.6% women who were depressed and also expressed alcoholic-related problems. And we all know, in 2020, in the Indian Journal of Psychiatry, it shows in Nagaland, women in Nagaland suffered alcohol-related disorders, 30.6. This is all under prohibition, the act. And 22.2% experienced alcohol-induced depression. And not only that, physical domestic violence, I find Nagas are very silent on this. And why are Nagas silent on domestic violence and violence against women, we have two kinds of violence. One is the societal violence, which no one wants to talk about. It's a part of your culture. It's a part of patriarchy, so we don't talk about it. It brings bad name to the family. And the other side are these, addictive kind of violence which has been happening, and we hardly talk about it. We don't have data. We don't have a serious study on all these things. My appeal to the government, if it has any intention of lifting, is also that serious study must be first done. What kind of data do we have? We don't have. These are data done by outsiders on us. We really need to see whether lifting is really going to be good for us and affect us better. Are women going to be safer? Because already we have seen so much of women alcoholic-related deaths. Okay, in the 30 plus years, what have we seen? So much of not only the men beating us when they get drunk, but we ourselves really becoming real alcoholics. And why I'm saying it is we have consulted, we have helped out so much of these women, but we hardly have any centers for rehabilitating women. And much more so maybe for men who are alcoholics to help them. But we actually at this point in time, I wish both the government, the NBCC, all of us from the civil society, I wish we put our heads together to see how do we help all these recovering children and brothers and sisters that we have. So many of, I think for people of my generation, I think I've lost some of my best friends. Most of my best friends have died because of alcohol. And that includes men and women. So at this point in time, I think we shouldn't classify and think women are the victims, and therefore they're actually the victims, of alcohol. Not really, because women themselves have become the abusers of alcohol. This is the reality of Nagaland, which we don't want to talk about. Every other young college girl is already into drinking. And then again, when you have areas in Nagaland that have totally banned alcohol, which is good. You must have read reports of all the mothers standing at the gateway of the village and checking your gari. Election comes, everyone is there with the police, and that's our job. I don't join, but I know so many of our mothers do that. And why do they do that? Because they become victims of this kind of domestic violence. But at the same time, you will find that in areas where alcohol has been strictly prohibited, you've had huge and very high data of drug addiction, rise in HIV and AIDS. Our latest Nagaland data shows us HIV and AIDS really growing rampant in border areas where alcohol is strictly prohibited. There's so many things. Let's not think that just because we lift prohibition, Nagaland is going to turn into a paradise. I don't think so, Joel. There are always pros and cons, and I support the view that the church and the government really needs to sit down and resolve properly, because one, the church represents many of us who go to those churches, and the government represents us because we elected them. What are they sitting there for? No? So I think it's important.
I think that is a very good point. I'm sure you have lots of thoughts going on in your mind right now you want to share. But before we take the point on, the kind of the way forward that we're looking at, before we kind of conclude with some sort of a sense that this is now how we want to look at, in whatever way, whatever style you want to look at it. And we have discussed issues and problems and the implications of prohibition or lifting. Now, how do we go about and how do we go forward in this journey? So we will look at it. Before we do that, I would like to give time to Rashna or Sangdi, either of you, to share a little bit about their business for the last time as a short ad break.
We're finally here, Nagaland's first business school. If you are an aspiring entrepreneur or have an existing business and need help to scale your business, be a part of our exclusive business program. Here we work closely with you to design and build your business plan. You get access to markets, you get to network with 20 phenomenal startup founders, and also learn how to raise money for your business. Phenomenal content and mentors. Reach out to us.
I think this does not imply a liquor business. So, even if this lifted, it's not for liquor business anyway. Now we have really touched upon a lot of issues, from morality to law to government's responsibility to civil society's responsibility and domestic violence. I think it's quite interesting and insightful, and so glad to hear diverse views from all of you. Now, as a responsible and reasonable person, and you all are some sort of a very distinguished personalities in your own area, either in politics or civil society or church or in working with people, what is our way forward? Do we need to go for referendum, or does NBCC, or will NBCC just wash her hands off, saying that we disagree with the lifting, but it is the government of the day. At the end of the day, it's the government who would decide things. So you lift it or you keep it. It's up to you, or you are going to, not you as a person, but will the church continue to protest against the lifting of liquor prohibition? As a responsible people, how are we going to move forward from here? Anyone? Yes.
We are coming towards the end. I don't know where and how we are going to end up or wind up this discussion, but I feel like there are two courts here, two responsibilities. The act is in the court of the government. Let the government work out, study the act, and do what it has to do. I think they are fully aware. Those who are, handling this are fully aware what they have to do and have never done. For example, they are supposed to have a prohibition director. And the court of law can only take action only when the prohibition director file a case. And when there is no prohibition, like a director, for example, no action can be taken against any defaulter when we go to the court. So there are issues like that in the act. So let the government do its responsibilities of working out the implementation of the act. And now the other court, which is of the church, I think the church should continue to, deal with the social evils of our society. And we should graduate from the traditional youth, children, and women ministries, which we have been doing for over 100 years now. Hammering the same old way of ministry, from pulpit to outside mission, we refuse to change. The biblical principles will remain the same, right from the beginning, now and then for, until Jesus comes back. It will remain the same. The biblical principles will not change. But our strategies, the strategies of the churches to deal with the issues must keep changing with the change of time. With the different generations that we are dealing with. Today's young people are so different from, when we were growing up in the 80s and 90s as young people. And so the church, if we are to still, hammer around with those strategies today, is not going to win our people, our young people. So graduate from those continue those, but we have to go to a level where we have focused ministries for alcoholics, for drug addicts, for those, who are in broken home situations, for business community, for college, for students. There are endless areas. And that's, I see as, the best way for us to reach out to the total, the whole community. Otherwise, as of now, we are only focused, most churches are only focused on the pulpit ministry. Anything that we are doing outside, it's mission outside. And then it's the, physical projects. For some churches, banana farms, Yongchak farms, piggery farms are, more important than, discipling and winning souls and, reaching out to the broken homes. We need those also for livelihood, engagement and, helping the members. But we should get back, the church should get back to the primary calling, And I see that to be the solution for, may not be a complete solution. As long as we live in this world, there can be no complete solution. We are not in heaven as yet. And so, if the church can go into these things, I think it will be easier and better to handle the social evils that we have. I see it as more of a spiritual problem than social and political and, moral.
Okay.
And I think that is the huge responsibility of the church to deal with.
Okay. Thank you. Sir Sangam or Joel, or we can have a quick opinion on that and conclude it.
Yes, I would also like to support on what Mr. Mero has said, that the church should emphasize more on the recovery, prevention, and the recovery of the alcoholics or the addicts, and look on more on the broken families issues. Because when I was into addiction, I'm not blaming anyone, but I will say that there was no pastor or a priest or a church worker who came to me to tell me that what you are doing is wrong. I was left to drink and do what I wanted to do, and there was no interference from the church. And by 90s, I was already married. I had children. The family was suffering. But at that point of time, no church workers came to the house to pray for us and give counseling. And that is why, after my recovery, I thought that it is more appropriate to reach out to the addicts and the families. So that is what I'm working on, and I'm very happy to say that some churches are going along that line. Even as our Madam Rosemary said about the woman issue, now one church in Kohima, they've already started the women's special camp, dealing specially with the woman since last year. And I'm also part of that program. So in this way, if the church focuses more on the suffering people, on the addicts, the issues through the disease, not the substance, not the alcohol or the drugs, but the disease which the person is going through, I think it will be more beneficial and it will be more soul winning than harping on prohibition to be lived or not. That is my opinion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. See, Lungleng, we have this understanding that if prohibition is lifted, all Nagas will become drunkards. we have this misconception, and this view is narrow and prejudiced. Because we have to understand that Nagas have matured, have come a long way. For example, in Arunachal Pradesh, where there's no prohibition, I'm told that there are wine shops everywhere. But you won't see any local people in the wine shops. The only faces you would see is the Nagas, who reside there, who stay there for, different reasons. So, somehow I believe that even if prohibition is lifted, the situation would not be worse off than it is now. Drinkers will continue to drink, the non-drinkers will not drink. That is my understanding. And I also believe that the church should not be too dogmatic in its approach, because the issue of prohibition is dividing our society. We have more other important issues to take care of. The church and the people, the church and the government, we all have to come together as one on so many numerous issues. But the issue of prohibition is dividing us badly. And this does not bode well for the Nagas. So we have to give credit to the youngsters. See, the young people, as Mero stated, they have become matured. See, during my time, when we were growing up, my friends, they started drinking when they were 5, 6, when they were in 5th and 6th standard. But today the situation has changed. Young people, they don't drink anymore, especially the school-going children. They don't even go out of the house, by the way. Yes, after they get into colleges and go to Delhi and Mumbai, whatever, that is another issue. But we don't even see drunkards in the streets these days. Those days you will see drunkards in the streets. We don't see Nagas in the streets getting drunk and fighting and, we don't see that anymore. See, people are evolving. Nagas are evolving. Humans evolve. So I think we shall be jumping the gun. And we will be accused of being too judgmental if we say that, if prohibition is opened, Nagas will be destroyed, our youngsters will be destroyed. No, I don't think so. We're too mature for that.
Thank you.
Can I share?
Please, no. Yeah.
This will be the last thing, I think. Last chance.
I think,
So, many people think that drinking is a personal issue, so the church should not interfere. I also would like to say that faith is also a personal thing. It is personal. No one forces you to believe God. And so, when you are going to be baptized, the priest would ask you certain things. So you can say no and then skip the church if you think that the church is forcing you to become a believer. Now, the other thing is to the government. The government must not be afraid of the church. Do not use NLTP to cover the irresponsibilities that you have committed. They have committed. And every time NLA comes, Nagaland Legislative Assembly comes, they will talk about political freedom. They will talk about Naga political freedom and also NLTP issue. It is a way to divert the attention of the people, the crowd, in order to evade some of their mistakes. Could be. The other thing is to join. If you want to talk about NLTP, let it be there in your election political manifesto. Moi jitishe koile do NLTP hatai dibo. Itu thakibi. That will be very good. Finally, to the church must understand that saying no will not be a panacea for all of our ills. The church must renew her vision in education, educating, preaching against alcohol menace, providing guidance and counseling with spiritual accompaniment to those who are affected by alcohol. Thank you.
Well, thanks.
Maybe a few more words.
Yeah.
I think I'm here not only representing myself, but representing all mothers, wherever we are. And we must understand that as far as mothers are concerned, no mother will tell you to drink, isn't it?
Yeah.
Every mother will tell you not to drink. Whether prohibition is there or not, whether it's lifted or not lifted, every mother is going to tell you not to drink because it's bad for you. The choice is yours, definitely. But because it's bad for you, every mother is going to do that. And that will always be our stand. Whether prohibition is lifted or not lifted and continues with the government coming back into its senses, being more responsible, whatever. We all know the effects of how much drinking really does to all of us in the homes, in our society, in our, in our family circles. We've all seen it. And therefore, let's leave it to the good sense of the government. I always believe that a government is there because we elected the government, and therefore the government should think for the good of its citizens. And if we don't have a government that is not thinking what is good for the citizens, then we might as well as all go back to the jungles, isn't it? Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your valuable insights that you have shared with us, this evening. And thanks, everyone, for patiently sitting here. At some point of time, it may not be very interesting as well, but I think issues like this need to be really discussed. And I'm sure you will walk away today with some sort of an perspective from here. Not necessarily concluding, oh, no, it should be lifted or it should not be lifted, but at least some sort of the pros and cons of what happens if we lift it or what happens if we don't lift it, and why we are not lifting it and why the government is interested in lifting it. So the importance of having a different views like this is that we get to know we have a choice of which one looks good, which one looks bad. So like when you go to a showroom when there are, hundreds of choices for clothes, we're more excited than having just 3 or 4 choices. So I think comparably, it's good that we have different, views from different people, and thank you so much to all of you as well. Now, before we actually conclude, I would like to give time to Gracie for the conclusion. Yeah. And thank you all for coming to this event. I think depending on the need, we will try to organize more events like this on various issues. And yeah, thanks for your continuous support. It means a lot, especially to me. I thought that many might not turn up, but at least we have a sizable number of people here, especially the young people, and we all are the future for future generation. Everything is going to be in our hand. I mean, 10, 15 years down the line, they all will be more or less irrelevant as old people, but we will all continue. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Well, to encourage the host, Ransom, let me encourage you by saying that times have changed. There will be more crowd on the social media platform, right? From different parts of Nagaland and also beyond to be witnessing this conversation that we have had today. As we wrap up today's discussion, I think we have covered a wide range of perspective, certain things that majority has agreed upon, and I could see the audience nod along with them, that number 1, government has failed, that number 2, church has also not done their part as they should, right? And that then Nagas, where are we as a society? We seem to be lost at this juncture. So 1, is the government supposed to lift the ban partially with strict regulation, or for once should government sincerely try to implement the act and then review again, right? But the final conclusion that all of our panelists here agree, is that we should sit and reason together and critically review this with all the stakeholders coming together with an open mind without any prejudice. I think that is one conclusion that we all agree with, right? So this has been such an incredible, engaging conversation and meaningful conversation. I think the panelists here deserve a round of applause, a big one for, yes, for boldly giving their perspective, and perhaps some of the clippings may go, on social media, and then more debates are going to be happening there. So be prepared, and continue to engage our young people on the social media platform as well, and then try to dialogue with them. Continue this discussion physically as we have had today, and even online. In the online platform as well. And to all the people who have registered and been part of this program, thank you for contributing a little bit, to support a platform like this, like the Lungleng Show, and many other young people who are trying to bring the socio-economic, political issues of significant matters that impacts us. Your little support goes a long way to keep these conversations alive, to kind of, keep these people, engaging in perspective in issues that matters. And as Madam was saying, is the government listening? Is the people who are supposed to listen, are they listening to us? Let's continue this conversation so that the people who are supposed to hear us, should be able to hear the voices of all of us here, both offline and online. So I think with that, we will conclude. And a round of applause also to all the audience who have, so patiently and come all the way, and gave 2 hours of your time. We started a little late because of the traffic jam and everything. And you can also blame the corruption also, right? The road condition and everything. So with that, I think we will end the conclusion. We'll conclude, and then is there any other thing you'd like to add?
I mean, nothing much.
The social media platforms, platforms like that run with very little resources. So I'm sure our young people who have changed their attitude will understand that there is no pork feasting here, right? And off the record, as we all exit from here, you can please continue your conversation, with our panelists as well, if they have time to stay back. So yes, with this, let's keep the conversation going offline, online, and everywhere we can in your circle and in your college and in your workplace as well. Thank you for your time and attention. Yeah.
Thank you.